You are listening to the Famous at Home podcast with Dr. Josh and Christi Straub.
Because when it's all said and done, we all want to know that we were famous at home. Welcome back to the Famous at Home podcast. Today we are in episode 3 of a 5-part series on cultivating an emotionally healthy marriage. We're talking about hard things. We're going to be talking about hard things. Hard things in marriage. So the difficult topics, we call them elephants. The elephants that come waddling into our room every now and again into our marriage, and we argue about it, we dance around it, but then we never really resolve it, and it kind of walks out of the room and it rears its ugly head another time. That's what we're talking about. How do we talk about those things? We set the stage for that last week with cultivating emotional safety in the home and in your marriage. This week is talking about hard things. So what I would love to do is also remind you that we have PDF downloads and a free workbook for you to be able to download during this series. If this is your first introduction to this series, all 5 episodes will have the PDF download and workbook available for you for free. You can download that in the show notes. I also want to make highlight of this. We do a weekly devotional, and we'd love for you to sign up for that online. That is in the show notes today. We actually put an example one in there for you to be able to read, particularly on the topic of marriage. And so you can read that and then decide if you want to subscribe. But it's a free weekly devotional that we send out through Famous at Home. Just things that I'm constantly learning about being a father, being a husband, and just growing as a son of God. And so we'd love for you to sign up for that. Final reminder here today is Tender and Fierce is coming up August 7th. It begins on a Wednesday night. They will be Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Deadline is coming up to register for that. Ladies, it is filling up. We would love to have you. I know Christi would desire that and love that so much. And we're praying diligently for everyone who is in this group. Testimonies, you can read those online. And it's just a beautiful journey. It's a joy to watch the transformation in women that are happening as a result of Tender and Fierce. And so I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. It is one that might bring up some things for you because we're talking about difficult topics. But what we hope comes out of this for you is a framework from which you can have these conversations together with your spouse. So without further ado, here's our conversation on talking about hard things in marriage. We are so excited that you've joined us today. We are actually moving into February, which is, everybody calls it Love Month. It's one of those things that we do in the West to get people to buy more candy and more cards and spend more money and eat more sugar.
Right, because we haven't had enough sugar between Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas,
New Year's.
It's like, you know what? We should add another sugar holiday.
No wonder it's flu and cold season in the winter.
Did I say this on the podcast before?
I don't know, but it's...
I saw this meme. Was it a meme? Something like that. I don't know. Something the internet's told me. And it was like, why do we have... we have a candy holiday followed by a pie holiday followed by a cookie and treats holiday. And for some reason, we call it cold and flu season when we should just call it sugar poisoning.
Wow.
Or we should call it, I think their line was, we should call it what it really is, sugar poisoning. I was like, oh, ouch.
Ouch.
But it's true.
It is true. And we're not here to give health advice, but eat your oranges and your apples and your grapes and your...
Like natural sugars? Is that what you're saying?
Natural sugars. That's right. Don't eat normal sugars. Eat natural sugars.
We really have been trying. Okay.
Sugars.
We've actually been trying a few things in this house.
Oh, in fact, we have to pause a little bit of this episode because...
I have exactly 19 minutes until my sourdough bread comes out of the oven. So if I hear a little beep, I'm going to have to run. That's been so fun for me. That's become it's
amazing. Your bread is unbelievable. Coming
right
out of the straight out of the oven.
For those of you that are struggling with gluten, because I don't do gluten or dairy, I can eat it and I'm okay. And it tastes like real bread, which I haven't had in years. So
amazing. Our kids love it. They don't even like eating regular bread from the store anymore. And we, in Pennsylvania, we went to Pennsylvania for New Year's. And the thing to do in Pennsylvania, it's Pennsylvania Dutch German thing, is having sauerkraut on the New Year for good luck. And so we started looking into sauerkraut, the benefits of it, and making it for real. And it's the highest thing ever in antioxidants. Anyway, so we're doing some homemade
and
sauerkraut.
probiotics. But
that's what I meant. Probiotics. Yeah. Sorry. I said antioxidants.
So yeah, we've been making that. I made homemade yogurt the other day.
She's getting to be quite the...
Who am I? Yeah. I don't know.
I love it. Today we're talking about hard things in marriage, and there's a lot of hard things in marriage. Christi, I'd love to hear some from you. So what we're going to do is we're just going to talk about a few hard things in marriage, and then we're going to talk about some ways that we can just kind of talk through. How do we have these conversations? How do we have the hard conversations that we're afraid to have with our spouse? Because for any number of reasons, maybe our spouse isn't on board, maybe our spouse doesn't see their behavior, insight into their behavior. Maybe it is a touchy subject where you guys have been around and around and around about it, and it's just you just see no way out of the cycle.
I think that's so often the case, though. It's the subjects that you have a history with, and every time I bring this up, every time I bring up X, Y happens, and it goes to a bad place, or they go off the handle. I know it's going to end, and it always ends like this, and it never goes anywhere, which is why we want to talk about it, because it's the hard topics.
And I want you to, let's start thinking about what are the hard topics that you have in your marriage. Like I wrote a list down here. I don't know what topics, Christi. I'm just going to ask you, what are hard topics that we have in our marriage? Maybe that you could
just
talk to me about right now.
And just to preface, we have prepped for this exactly 0 seconds together. So
I have a whole list of stuff here.
He has a laptop.
I've got everything ready to rock and roll. And so I told Christi, I'm like, I'm not going to show you my notes because I'd rather hear from you specifically. So it's kind of like
And here's how I roll. I just walked in and I sat down and we hit record. So this will be very honest.
Yeah. But that's what we love. So go ahead. What are some hard things, Christi?
In-laws? Holidays?
I did not write either one of those two down.
Oh, interesting.
I did not write either. Isn't that crazy? In-laws and holidays. I didn't write either one of those down.
Oh, wow. I'm interested to hear your list then.
It's amazing.
There's specific parenting things, especially with specific kids.
That is one that I wrote down. When we're not on the same page as it relates to parenting, or we don't see eye to eye on how we're navigating the parenting relationship with one another. Mm-hmm. So maybe one's too harsh, one's not harsh enough.
Yep.
Not even harsh. You identify or you perceive someone's being harsh because you're too lenient. And
Ooh.
Maybe. Yeah.
Oh, that's good insight over there, Straub.
Over there.
I would say sex or the lack thereof.
Sex is a big one. And a lot of these...
We've talked about that a little bit before as like the elephant in the room. We're having those conversations. I feel like today we're talking more about like, it's the hard thing though.
And some of these I wrote down. I mean, these are things that we hear commonly from families and couples.
Wait, would you like to add? Because I could probably keep going. But
I want you to keep going because you said two that I didn't. Well, I had sex down. I had parenting down. You said in-laws. You said holidays. What else?
I think like insecurities.
So I wrote down habits. I don't know if that's kind of a that's a similar one.
I feel like that's different actually. I think insecurity it's that thing that we all have blind spots. We can't see them, but everyone else can, especially our spouse. And so I think it's like you see that insecurity in them, but it's so tender and you know that it is. So the last thing you want to do is call it out or bring it to the surface.
But it leads to
it's
habits.
Affecting...
It's habits. It's our habits, I think, that speak into what those insecurities are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think, from habits, I'm just thinking of, maybe it's eating habits, maybe it's laziness, maybe it's a habit of not being around people or the desire to go out and be with people or the desire to get engaged with others or maybe it's a habit of being too busy, filling the schedule so that you don't have to stop and think about things.
Yeah.
I wrote another one down, a schedule. Schedule's one that I did write down, where we're so busy, and it's like, I don't want to be as busy as we are, but the other person's like, oh, we're not that busy. It's like there's a rub between schedule.
And it's not even, oh, we're not that busy. It's like, don't you dare like touch
it gets hard,
that because that's really, I think these hard conversations, it always comes back to offense. That the other person, because if you think about it, when you actually get into those really heated arguments in marriage, it's offense. Someone has taken up, because you can have conversation about things even if you disagree, and it's hard. But typically, I think it's when we like flip our lid.
That's good, yeah.
Which we talk about like in the kids'
trying to
EQ.
defend yourself.
We flip our lid when we get offended and we're on the defense. Like, you've hurt me. And so I flip to the defense, and it's like, once we're in that like vein of thought, it doesn't actually really matter what the other person is saying, because
that's touching the insecurity or the wound.
Yeah.
That's why that happens. Is it's touching. It's like, I think of like, holidays, or like, when maybe it's in-laws, whatever these hard topics are. And someone said, what about when your spouse or a family member is stirring up the pot, and of course they finally hit your button? Mm-hmm. What could be or should be the first words out of your mouth? How should we bring the conversation back a few notches? Like, I catch myself being defensive is what this person said. Like, It's like, it's speaking exactly to what this person is asking us to talk about in some respects. And because we get defensive because it's triggering something within us that we don't, it's
a wound. And I think that's it. It's like a lot of these hard topics come back to a prior wound, and it might be something that you are potentially not willing to deal with.
And potentially, but it could also be that the other person is projecting stuff onto that person, and it's not necessarily a wound in your life. It's the wound of the person that's projecting the stuff onto you, and you're getting defensive because you're like, you're not even living in reality right now. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not just the fact that you get offended, because it might be the very fact that the person throwing the criticism is not seeing things correctly.
Yeah. And I think one of those, it's that discrepancy. It's like the hard things are because I might see it in a different way than you, and I am convinced that I'm right and you are wrong. And so it is such a tender and touchy subject because we're seeing the situation through our lens. Exactly. And typically it's because I have an agenda on the other side. I want to have this conversation because I want change on the other side. I want you to be different, or this to change, or whatever. Right. And so it gets so confrontational.
Like, let me give you an example of that, because it can get super confrontational. And I'm going to give you an example of that because this has played out in our marriage, where in the past I could be super, but this was years worth. So you have to understand, like, this is years worth of me living out of fear, or saying, things that are fearful that Christi had to learn how to respond to. And so all of a sudden, now that I'm healed in healing process, way, 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 way better, and have grown ridiculous compared to where I was earlier, I can say something, and there's times I actually say things jokingly, but I can say something that takes her back there immediately, and she reacts
to the old you,
to the old me, when the reality of what's going on inside of me is not anywhere fearful or anything like that. And then we sometimes get into a little spiff of like, why are you throwing that on me? Like,
well, I don't get into the spiff. You do, but I realize I'm the one who's projecting it on you.
No, you're projecting it on me based upon
your... And it doesn't bother me, but it bothers you.
But it's because you're projecting something onto me based on your previous experience that isn't true in the present.
Right. But it's hard to see a similar behavior through a different lens.
Yeah. Right. And that's what makes this hard. Yes. That's what makes these things hard. So sex is one of those. And if you've had difficulty with sex or your sexual relationship early on, and now all of a sudden you're starting to find breakthrough, like, there can be ways that you all of a sudden go back to the old patterns, and then it's like, oh, like, I don't even want to have sex now. And then sex is a hard conversation to talk about. Money's one it's one I wrote down that we didn't bring up. Like, what about how we spend money? What if one of the persons is one of the spouses is, one of you is a spender and the other one's a saver.
Yeah.
And you can't get on the same, money is just parenting. You said in-laws, holidays, schedule, habits, God. We often hear that where one spouse wants the other spouse to be more engaged with church or a relationship with God in some way, shape, or form. And that's a hard conversation to bring up. Hobbies is another one.
And everything you're saying, do you know what I keep hearing? It's idols. It gets hard because we're holding on to an idol. We're defending that idol at the expense of the relationship. So it's like we're turning back to that thing to protect that thing. And I'll defend that against you coming at me, at it. And I think for us to even just start the conversation, I think we have to start by changing the perspective of what Laurie Loki, who leads Leader's Heart, I've probably said this on the podcast before. She says, expectation is just premeditated resentment. Let that sink in for a sec. But expectation is just premeditated resentment. So if I'm coming into a conversation and I see something in Josh, or it's a hard conversation, right? It's because I want an outcome. I want something to change on the other side. I know it's hard because there's probably an idol. There's probably a wound. There's something underlying that makes things that prickly and tender. And so I recognize that. But if I'm coming in, I'm coming in with an agenda. Like there's a reason. I typically don't go, we typically don't just go in looking for a fight. Sometimes we do because we just want the attention. But to broach a really hard topic like that, we're wanting a change. And I think if we can first change the priority of the conversation to be connection, it's not the expectation on the other side. So it's that I am actually seeking to know your heart. And I want you to know mine, like my heart, not my objective on the other side. But the reason I'm coming into the conversation at all is connection with you, not the agenda on the other side. And that starts to turn us, if you can picture you and your spouse facing each other, protecting your idols behind you, whatever that thing is. And maybe idol feels like too strong of a word. I guess it depends on the situation, whatever it is that you're protecting or what you're going after. Because it might be a good thing. Like it could be faith. It could be, I want you to have a deeper relationship with God. I want you to, oh wait, is that my bread? Hold tight. It
must be with children yelling.
Hold on one sec. Be right back. Okay.
Sorry for the pause.
I'm back.
You're back. What happened?
She looks like, she's a beauty. She's currently wrapped in a damp towel as she starts to cool, which gives you the chewy crust, not the crunchy, flaky, where it like breaks off because the kids don't like that. So she's cooling on the counter right now.
Hey, can I just bring something up? So you're just talking about connection and the whole idea of connection versus expectation, like going in with a connection. Mm-hmm. But one of the things you said in that little monologue that you had there was that if
are you saying monologue because I talk too long?
No, it wasn't that you talked too long. It was just there was something you said in there where monologue because you were the one speaking and nobody else was. One mono.
Got it.
You said sometimes we pick a fight. Unless you pick a fight just because you need attention. Mm-hmm. Do you do that with me? That's new to me. We pick fights because we need attention?
Think about it. Do you pick
a fight because you're not being loved enough?
I think sometimes we do it. I honestly don't know that I do, but 100%, you look at other couples, they will it's like a child. Any type of attention is what they're looking for.
No, totally. I get that.
Even
I just
if it's
didn't know
negative
if you were doing
attention.
That to me, if you were picking some fights with me because you were not getting enough attention in the house.
No, I don't.
The next time you pick a fight with me, I'm going to ask you, am I giving you enough attention?
But if you think we do this, do we not?
No, we do. We might not know that we need attention, but it's.
But there are times where you're like, forget it. I don't even care. I just need, see me. see my need. Totally. And so like, we don't even care how it comes out.
But that's another topic that's another hard thing is the marriage relationship itself.
Yeah.
Like that's not something I mentioned earlier, but I did write it down. Like maybe your intimacy level, like that you don't feel connection. You don't feel the connection.
And that's a super hard topic.
The intimacy.
Yes. Especially because one person, it may not even be on their radar. Or at least they don't appear like it is.
Because there's nights, yeah, exactly. Because there's nights where it might be that, I think there's times where this happens where me or you are looking for connection with each other, and I'm putting us together in this because I think this happens to both of us, where one of us is desiring connection and the other's just checked and wants to watch a show or just go off on their own and be like, I'm going to go read a book or I'm going to go. And it's like, no, That's need so real. Your connection right now. And
one person's needing it and the other one's like, I just want to be alone. I just need to like read a book or go to bed.
So how do we do this? I think you set it up so well. You teed it up so well. It's connection over expectation. So what are you trying to get out of the conversation? What are you trying to get out of talking about this hard thing that you're talking about? What is it that you want? And it has to start with connection. If it's another, I think what you said is great, because if it's another motive, then it might not go anywhere because you're trying to change your spouse at that point. And the reality is you can't change your spouse. So if you're going into this conversation trying to change your spouse, that's the wrong motive.
And it's realizing when connection isn't our motive, again, there's something else going on. And that perspective shift changes everything. If I'm going in, I just want to connect with you. I really want to connect with you. Like I want to know the heart underneath it, which is so much more tender than the things that we do on the outside to protect ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so you might be offended, angry, resentful of how they have tried to protect themselves on the outside. So the best perspective shift for you is connecting. We've talked about that before. The little boy, the little girl underneath. What is that tender heart under them that they're trying so hard to protect?
And in order to get that motive, so number one is start with connection. Number two is set the tone. So you have to know, like Christi just said, like we just got into this conversation about we pick a fight because we need attention. That's not setting the tone. So I say set the tone, meaning the timing is everything. Atmosphere is everything. If I'm trying to talk to Christi about a hard issue while she's putting in a grocery order or packing our kids a lunch or getting her morning coffee, or like there's times where I'm like, if I bring this to you now, it won't go well. Like it just, you won't receive it well. It doesn't matter if my heart is pure. It doesn't matter if my heart is connection. Yeah. It's just not going to be received well. Mm. So you have to set the tone. You have to know the atmosphere of the relationship, the atmosphere of the home, and the timing of it in order to have that conversation. So I think that's huge. And again, there's never, for some of these conversations, it's like, when's the perfect time? There might not be a perfect time. It's just that some times are better than others. And I think it's navigating when is the best time to do that. The third thing that I would say is this, because connection, you're starting with connection, is to lead with a team approach. So start with connection, set the tone, and lead with a team approach. So in other words, Dr. Carol Rusbelt found that couples who have an us against the world attitude and they carry that attitude into the relationship have higher marital satisfaction. And so if we have an us against the world attitude, lead with that. Lead with, we're a team. You're not my enemy. I'm not trying to change you, though there's behaviors that I might want you to, that might be better if you changed or that, live differently. But I want to make sure that we are growing together, which leads to the fourth one, which is own your part. So in other words, it's we, therefore I. Are you in? One of the things David Burns found is that those who take 100% responsibility for their role in a conflict or their role in a situation, that's what leads to marital satisfaction as well. Taking 100% responsibility for your role. So if you're talking about any of these issues, sex, money, parenting schedule, holidays, in-laws, habits, God, hobbies, the marriage relationship itself, don't blame. Use we, us, I statements, not you. The more you use, the less listening the other. If you're using you, the other person's ears are going to start to shrink and get closed. like they're going to shut down. So I love us. I love when we're together. I love when we spend time together. I miss you. If you're going to use the word you, use it in a way that is endearing and affirming and that is honoring and that is bringing you as a team. I miss you. I love you. I desire to be with you, right? So and then the last part of this, and again, I know we're rushing through or it feels like we're rushing through a formula here for these conversations, but it's like, there is no black and white formula. Like the conversation is connection. The conversation is setting the tone. These are ways that we can have it in a way that is best going to go the right direction. The last one is this. So set the tone, lead with a team approach, own your part. So we, therefore I. The last one is this. Come with a solution, not the problem. You see, I think we teach our kids this a lot. If you show up with a problem, you're dumping a problem on your spouse that's already a hard issue. So not only are you just talking about a hard issue, now all of a sudden you're putting that hard issue on your spouse to say, figure this thing out, right? Whereas if you already have a solution, you've prayed through a solution, and that should go without saying, but I probably ought to say it, be prayed up to have these conversations with your spouse. Yeah. That's part of setting the tone, is praying. This morning I was sitting down during my quiet time, and I just prayed through the head of household prayer that John Eldridge has in the Wild at Heart app and in his book, Waking the Dead. It's a fabulous prayer, and I just pray it every so often over our home, over our family, to set the atmosphere, to set the tone over our home. And I think that's critical in having these conversations.
And I think that bears mentioning, like, if you are a believer in Jesus, you are under the authority of Jesus. You also have that authority in you to command the things that are not of God that must bow. But you get to take that authority. And so if that's unfamiliar, that resource that Josh has said, John Eldridge's Waking the Dead, Wild at Heart, they're just really helpful tools. And I lean into that.
We can put that in the show notes today.
You need to walk in that authority. But in so doing, you subdue the things that are not of God before the conversation. I do this when I have conversations in business with friends, when we go to speak somewhere, or you just call the king, it's the atmosphere of heaven versus the atmosphere of hell. And if that is whatever atmosphere you're walking into, you need to bring the kingdom and the authority of God with you. And you assert that. And so all those things that cause division and strife, especially if we're talking in a marriage, those things, they don't get to speak in this conversation. In Jesus' name, I thank you, God, that only the love of God, I pray the love of God between me and my spouse.
The love of God and the Spirit of God between me and my spouse. That is a massive prayer.
What is the Spirit of God? It's the fullness of his love. It's joy. It's peace. It's gentleness. It's kindness. You see how this shifts the entire atmosphere, but also you as you walk in, because you're not coming in offended and angry and with an agenda. You're coming in with the fullness of the love of God and the atmosphere of heaven at your back that goes before you, that shifts the atmosphere when you walk in the room. Your spouse doesn't know what's going on, but they'll feel it. And the very things in him, maybe that resentment, maybe that defensiveness, maybe that the thing that you're used to coming up against, if it might stand down, if you have prayed that it would stand down. And basically that changes who's speaking back to you. Like, it changes who you're having the conversation with, because our words have the power of life and death, but we can choose to use them either way. And we also have the ability to change the environment by the very words we speak.
Right. So when you come into this, that's part of setting the tone. Seek connection, and as you pray, on earth as it is in heaven. That's exactly what Christi's talking about, that your conversation is doused in the fragrance of heaven. Setting the tone, leading with a team approach, owning your part, and then coming up with a solution, not the problem. So in other words, what if we tried this? And here's what I'm thinking of doing. for my role in this? What are your thoughts? Invitation, inviting your spouse in and saying, and owning your part and saying, would you be on this with me? And so in other words, what the phrase there that I wrote out for this is we, therefore I, are you in? So you're leading with a team approach, talking about the hard issue. We're in this together. Therefore, I need to do X, Y, and Z because I'm owning this and I haven't done a great job and I'm going to end up doing X, Y, and Z as part of this. Are you in? What are your thoughts, right? You're inviting your spouse in. And so that could look anything like, and we can take any one of these topics here, we haven't had sex in a very long time. And I know that part of that is my inability to pursue your heart in the way that you like. Non-sexual touch, words of affirmation, acts of service, that you desire those things. And I just haven't done a very good job of that. So over the next few weeks, I am going to really pay attention to making sure that I'm loving you well and loving you in those areas so that we can have a more vibrant sex life. Are you in? So you're, that's an example that I just came up with, but coming together, there's got to be a level of compromise. There's got to be a level of understanding the other person. Mm-hmm. In order to be understood, we must first understand. So your spouse might be defensive at first. Your spouse might be, have their guard up. That's okay. Seek to understand. Lean in and listen. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. For human anger does not accomplish God's righteousness. That's James 1:19 and 20. This is some of the most, I think that is the most sanctifying and difficult verse to live out. Be quick in these situations. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. If you need to, sit and listen in that context.
That's good. I think too, recognizing the defensiveness of your spouse, like if this is going back to a hard topic is usually an older topic, right? So if it's something that, like we said before, this always happens when, just be aware of that coming in and pray specifically against that thing. If it's division, jealousy, strife, hurt, a wound, pray specifically, like preemptively for that. Like, I thank you, Lord, that there will be no division between us. I thank you that the spirit of division is subdued under you. I thank you that there is only and then replace it with what the kingdom of God would put. Is that love? Is that peace? Is that self-control? And that subduing and replacing with the kingdom of God will absolutely shift, no matter how the details of the conversation, but that defensiveness in that person. And very likely it might be the one time that you're like, wow, that every other time it's gone this way. And all of a sudden now, just see.
It's good.
It'll shift.
Until next week, keep in mind that the greatest red carpet you will walk is through your front door.
Keep being famous at home. We love you.
Thank you for listening to the Famous at Home podcast. If anything we said today hit home with you or resonated in such a way you want to share it with others, go find us on Instagram at Famous at Home and comment, share, tell others about today's episode.
We'd also love if you would leave us a review. Reviews mean so much to us, and they also help other people find out about the podcast. So if you could leave us a review, we would appreciate it.
You can also visit famousathome.com/podcast to submit a question or topic for a future episode.
And for coaching or speaking inquiries for your family or your organization, visit famousathome.com. We would love to serve you.
Because the greatest red carpet you'll ever walk is through your front door.